Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. This is a STS special, Surviving My Biggest Case. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And today, it is our special series, Surviving My Biggest Case, with a very special best guest here today, Jim Fuda, F-U-D-A, Jim Fuda. He is a public safety advisor with a proven track record in the areas of law enforcement, training, and security. He's got a lot of experience. He's an expert on hostage negotiations, responding to more than 300 hostage and barricade situations during his 33-year tenure with the King County Sheriff's Office, that is the Seattle area. And Jim is a physical security specialist, providing security for dignitary visits to Seattle, including for Presidents George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, as well as international figures like Nelson Mandela and Maya Angelou. In addition, Jim served as police and military consultant trainer for the U.S. Department of Justice in Bosnia, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And he was formidable in tailoring democratic police training material to the political environment in these assigned countries. Currently, Jim is the executive director of Crime Stoppers of Puget Sound, a nonprofit organization that encourages members of the community to assist local law enforcement agencies in the fight against crime. Jim, welcome to you. So you are the guy in all the movies, but you're the real one that we see anytime something's going down and Denzel Washington's about to mix it up. You're the guy on scene trying to talk the criminal out of doing whatever the criminal is about to do. Is that accurate? Somewhat accurate.
We're the team. The only difference with that in the movies is that the negotiator doesn't run everything. He's just got his niche to try to keep things calm and get the bad guys out.
And before we get into, I think, a couple, but we're definitely going to hit one of your major stories. Before we get into that, what is, in your opinion, the most important attributes of a hostage negotiator? I talked to you a few minutes off camera. I can already tell you're cool, calm, and collected. But from your vantage point, what is the most important few attributes to have?
I think the biggest thing is that one has to be able to listen. We all communicate. And it was tough for me to learn this. And when I was in those situations, is I always have to tell myself is, look, listen to what that person is saying. And because you're already formulating in your mind what you're going to respond. And if you listen to what that person, he'll tell you what he needs. You know, they're saying, I want this $1 million. I want this plane to Cuba. And I want this and that. But what they want is, holy shit, I'm going to go to prison. I don't want to be hurt. Help me. Mm-hmm. And so you build the bond that way. And you got to, cops are type A personalities. You got to put that aside and listen to what that person is and let them think they're in charge. They're really not. Once that area is contained, they're not in charge of anything. But they can, never know what kind of damage they can do in the meantime.
So that is absolutely fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why. I left the news business as a national correspondent for Fox News, and what I learned along the way, and I really tried to study it during my 27-year tenure in news, and 99% of people on air are horrific at it, but the best interviewers are the ones who listen. That's really the key to being not only, I guess, a hostage negotiator, but if you want to be good as a TV broadcaster, you really have to listen, because most people who do what I do, they've got a list of questions. I usually don't ever come prepared with a list of questions, because then you're just looking to your next question, and you might tell me the sky is purple instead of telling me a story about hostage negotiations, and I have to react to that. So it's very interesting to me, because I'm a big proponent of listening. I don't always do it well, especially when my mother is co-hosting. I have a huge habit of cutting her off and not listening. But when I've got the best guests like you, I really do try to listen, and that always provides for the best questions, I think. So your story, at least one of them, you told me a couple that are already mind-blowing. I think you said it was the first or one of a few hostage situations where it was basically that someone was going to be killed on deadline. Explain what that means and take me back to this moment. Start from the very beginning here.
Yeah, it killed on a deadline is meaning the suspect will always, if they got a hostage or even if they're barricaded by themselves, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You've got this amount of time, 30 minutes to give me what I want, or I'm going to kill somebody and do this. Well, it happens all the time, but it's very rare they actually do it. They don't want that deadline to come up as much as you don't, because that brings things to a head. So talking through deadlines are really not that difficult to do. But in this particular case, I was dealing with an antisocial personality. He was 23 at the time. He had a wife and a girlfriend, had a kid with each one of them. He actually had restraining orders against him from both women. He had threatened to steal the baby when one was being born in the hospital with a gun. And he had hooked up with a 17-year-old girl who was having trouble at home in a rural area of my county. But he had to tell them they had to steal some things, do a couple burglaries to get some money, and they were going to run off together to California. Well, this particular night, they get stopped in a stolen car in a very rural area by the sheriff's office. They run from that car and then barricade themselves in a stolen VW camper van. I get the call, and I'm the first one of the negotiations team on site. We usually call out 4 negotiators for call outs. One will be a primary, one will be the secondary negotiator that listens to what's going on and casually writes notes to the primary. So like the idea that 2 heads are better than one to negotiate somebody out, and somebody that can actively listen while the primary negotiator is actually talking to the bad guy. Then an intel guy, and then the team leader. Well, as a sergeant, I was normally the team leader, but this particular one, I got thrown into the primary role because I was first one there. And I get to behind a right front tire of a police car. This guy's in a stolen van.
Let me stop you for 1 second. So take me back. What year is this? How long ago is this? And just explain. I love all the behind the scenes stuff. So even before you get on scene, tell me what you're doing and how. I assume you're on call 24/7 for situations like this, which has to be somewhat anxiety provoking because you never know. Like in the news business, you never know. I never knew when I was getting called to a story because you never know when something's going to break. And I remember one time there was a terror attack in London, and they said you got to be on a plane in 45 minutes. And to go to London in 45 minutes, you get some anxiety coursing through your veins. So just take me back. What year is this? I guess what time of year, and tell me what you were doing as this call came in.
Yeah, it was June 1st, 1993. It was middle of the night. I was in bed. Got my phone call and up and running, and go to the scene. And I get there. I had no briefing. I had no real idea what was going on. I talked to the patrol deputy. There were 2 of them behind this police car tire, with the engine blocking them. The typical thing you'd see on TV. And he says, "Holy shit, Jim! I'm glad you're here. I'm getting nowhere with this guy." So, I talked him through a couple days. He wanted cigarettes and a pen and a paper. So, cigarettes, you don't give him a whole pack. So I put 3 cigarettes in a blue medic's glove with some matches and a rock, tossed it to the right front tire of the van. He never picked it up.
And hold on, you don't give him the full pack because you don't want him just to smoke. It'll take too long to smoke the whole pack. Is that the idea?
Well, you want him to ask for him again and get something out of it.
Okay.
And for that, I did get a gun. He had 2 guns. He did throw a gun out. But what he'll say, and we did an interview with him later, and it says, "Well, I threw that out because I wanted to let you know that I was willing to, play ball with you." wasn't true. He held his hand out and said, I got this gun, you assholes, and I'm not giving it up. And the only reason he threw that other one gun out, he didn't have any ammunition for it. So dealing with the antisocial personality. And then he wanted a pen and a paper, delivered it the same way. He found out later that was for the girl to write a goodbye note. He was going to kill her. Then he wanted a cell phone. So that was my hook, something that has value or meaning. And I told him, look, when you come out, talk on the phone till you're blue in the face. But I said, cell phone service back then especially doesn't work well here. So it's not going to work. Why don't you just come on out? So then he asked me, what am I wanted for? I didn't know. I honest to God, I didn't know. I got thrown into, all I knew was I had a guy with a 17-year-old barricaded in a van, threatening to kill her. And so I go ask the commander. The commander would not leave, you'll see the photos, would not leave eyeball sight of the situation. He wasn't in the command post. So I run around. I asked the commander, what's he wanted for? And he said, some DV issues, domestic violence issues, and hanging paper, bad checks. The bad guy answers, thank you. So now I can't soften anything. He knows he's going to jail, knows he's going to prison. And he said, you've got 30 seconds to give me that cell phone.
30 seconds, okay.
And during that time, he's pistol whipping the girl. And the girl is begging me to save her.
And Jim, what do we know at this point about this 17-year-old girl that he's got held hostage?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I just knew her first name.
And how did you even know? How did you even know for sure that he had a girl in there? Could you hear her?
Hear her? Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And
so he gives you 30 seconds to get a cell phone, which is interesting. Not in '93, cell phones were barely a thing.
Well, it's like you needed two men and a little boy to help hold it up. It's one of those big bricks. But what he was doing was working himself up. When he was pistol whipping her, she's begging us to save her. And when the 30 seconds was up, he slid the van door open, executed her, and then shot himself through the fatty deposits of his neck up here, because he was going to make it look like it was they both wanted to, it was a suicide pact. It was bullshit. One, we watched it. And two, if you look at the autopsy pictures, you can see where he shot her and the way the powder burns are around her back by her shoulder blade, which would right in front of her heart, is that there's no way you'd have to be triple, quadruple jointed to even hold a gun that way. To do that. And like I said, we watched it.
So that's not a very long deadline there. Did you say 30 seconds? He gave
30
you
seconds. Yeah.
30 seconds. I mean, did you even have time to react to that in terms of?
Sure. We were telling him this is not what to do. She's begging us to save her. But he had already worked himself up on it. In fact, the shrinks that talked about this said this was not a killed on a deadline. This was a homicide about to happen, that he was going to do it anyway. And it made sense to me when we talked about the pen and the paper, that he was going to have her write a goodbye note. But he with this antisocial personality, the sociopath, it was always someone else's fault. His parents didn't give him money, didn't help support him for a loan, this kinds of thing. So he was going to blame someone else for everything. So like the coward that he was, he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. And less than 1 year from the time he did this, I went up to go see him in the King County Jail. I wanted an interview with him. And I said, look, we would love to get an interview with you about, what happened and blah, blah, blah. And he said he would do it. So 3 days later, I go up with a film crew, and the jail commander at the time, who I knew, said, oh, Jim, I don't know if I could let you talk to him. We had to put him on suicide watch after you talked to him and that kind of thing. And I said, is he alive? And is he still willing to talk? And he says, yes. I said, let me talk to him. If he does what he does after, that's beside him. But I got a great interview on dealing with the antisocial personality at about the time he's to commit murder and technically attempt suicide, which was bullshit.
Yeah. So most important question, does he ever allow this girl to write the goodbye note?
No, he
Okay.
never picked the pen and paper. And I asked him that in the interview. We delivered the cigarettes. We delivered the pen and the paper. You never picked him up. Well, of course, he claimed he was going to come out and it was going to be a big shootout with us, kind of thing. And then in the interview, he goes, well, I was afraid if I reached out there, you'd have a sniper pick me off. That was the attitude.
And even more importantly, who was this 17-year-old girl, not yet even an adult, obviously, by legal standards, just 17 years old. Who did we find out she is? And I don't want to get too, gruesome, but was it a fatal shot to the head or what was it?
No, he shot her through by the shoulder blade, on the left shoulder blade, which the bullet went right through her heart.
And so who was she?
17-year-old girl. Her name was Virginia. She was having trouble at home, was a runaway from a small community, hooked up with this clown, and he was going to be the savior, and they were going to run away together. That was her impression.
Wow. So he gives you 30 seconds. You can't meet the deadline, which is understandable because it's a crazy deadline. And it also sounds like he had his mind made up. You see this harm. I mean, this is why first responders, this is why I have so much respect, partly because of the things that you see. So you see this murder literally before your eyes. She drops, of course. He shoots himself, but it's not fatal. Take me to the scene right after all this happens. What do you do? Obviously call paramedics.
Yeah, there were paramedics on standby. A SWAT team was, this, from the time I started in my negotiations to the time he shot her was 47 minutes. So it was that's a short negotiations, believe it or not. But things were getting set up. Snipers were getting set up. In fact, one was saying, well, the sniper could have had a shot from the front windshield. And I said, that's bullshit. There's no way, because they were in the back part of this van. It was dark. There's no way they could, when the high back seats from the driver's seat and the passenger seat, you wouldn't even be able to see him through that front windshield. So there's all these questions come up after. But what I found interesting on dealing with this personality type is, in that interview, I asked him, why did you kill, her name wasn't Virginia, it was Vanessa. Why did you kill Vanessa? And he said, I told you I would. I wanted a cell phone, and I told you that that was important to me, and I wanted a cell phone. So you took a life because of a cell phone. Told you I would.
Unbelievable. So he obviously this has to go through the court system. So you've got him in custody. He goes to the hospital. He doesn't die. He recovers. How long from the period of time where this incident took place, this murder, until he actually pleads guilty to avoid the death penalty, being the coward, like you said, that he is?
Well, the case, it was less than a year. They're preparing the case, blah, blah, blah. He pleads guilty because the death penalty was on the table at the time. And that's the typical sociopath thought process, is that I'm what's the best deal for me at this point right now? And that was it. So he took that, and because of that, it didn't drag on for longer, and I was able to get a pretty current interview with him that I put out around the globe on dealing with the antisocial personality for negotiators.
And was that interview was done by the King County Sheriff's Office?
No, I had a private group volunteer and put that together for me. I spent I think it's like a 17 or 18 minute video, what we've got it boiled down to, but I spent about 2.5 hours across the table from him. One of the hardest 2.5 hours I've ever spent.
I'm just taking some notes for myself, but I guess as a hostage negotiator, you always want to win the deal, so to speak. After you saw what transpired before you, did you become dejected? Did you feel like you failed at your job at that point?
Yeah, I'm not shy about sharing this. I had an incident prior to this in the late '80s where a guy killed himself with an electronic device. It was set on a photocell trigger. It was in a cheap motel room. He was despondent, and he built this device where enough sun came up that hit a photocell, that went to a battery pack, that went to a wire to a device he had strapped to his chest, that lit an electronic match, that lit a fuse, that heated a .22 rifle bullet, and fired his heart and killed him while I was talking to him. We didn't have critical incident stress debriefings then. When
hang on a sec. That sounds super. Why did he just not kill it? Wouldn't it have been easier to just pull the trigger?
Yeah, his thing, he didn't have the wherewithal to do that. So what he planned on doing was taking some pills, drinking some booze, going to sleep, and never let this device activate while he was passed out, and dying that way. The thing is, that turned out to be an accident. He was ready to come out. We were talking about the future. He was going to use me as a job reference, all these kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, I'm coaxing him, and I'll send you the 15-second piece of that tape where I'm saying, take that thing off and come on out now. And he goes, he heard the sizzling of the fuse, and he says, oh shit, it's going off. It's going off.
Oh, wow.
You hear a faint pop, and his last words were, I didn't think it would ever really happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
what was so that guy, and we'll get back to the original story, but that guy, I'm curious, what was his, first of all, he wasn't charged with that. He was basically trying to commit suicide, right?
it was a suicidal barricade. Yeah.
Suicidal barricade. So he wouldn't have been charged, right? That's not a situation where, let's say you got him out, he would have just been free to go get mental health help, right?
We would have taken him directly to our Harborview, our county hospital here for a medical psych eval. Yeah.
And I'm curious, what was did you know his profession? Like, was he did he have some sort of mechanics or mechanical background?
He was unemployed, separated from his wife, had a 7-year-old daughter at the time. That particular morning, he had met with his wife at a theater and bowl complex, gave her a shoebox full of stuff, $50 cash, and showed his wife this device. Was very proud of it. He built it after taking a correspondence course in electronics, and went to a Radio Shack and got the pieces that he needed, and went to an Indian reservation and got the firecrackers that he taped off the ends so they would fizzle. Unbelievable story. And then but he wouldn't tell the wife where he was staying. But he told her it was a bomb, not a single shot firing mechanism. So the wife obviously becomes concerned, calls us late that evening. He calls her. We get a trap on her phone, find out where he's at in this cheap motel, ironically, right across the street from a cemetery by our SeaTac airport here. And, so we go, this was right when US West deregulated. And so we had to call a US West phone tech to come help us. We went into a laundry area, and there was a breadboard of all these wires. And he literally had us hooked up with alligator clips. We no sooner get hooked up, we're doing a test on the things. He calls to say goodbye to the wife, and he gets me. So from midnight to 4:15 in the morning, I'm talking with him. And like I said, he was past his time of wanting to die, and he was ready to come out, and this took effect, and it killed him. But out of that, I developed a concept called trigger point, and that's that moment in time when a person is both mentally and physically capable of killing themselves. In other words, I have the desire to die, but to take that gun and blow your brains out is a short period of time. Why else are these people waiting? The negotiator's coming. Okay, I guess I'll wait and talk to him. And I think this is huge for the first responder who think they're going into a no-win situation when in fact posing options, talking calm, being supportive to get him past that point that you're going to save some lives.
Yeah. I find that really fascinating. And for anyone who's struggling with like suicidal ideation, and we'll put up, when we edit this, we'll put up a number there. I don't know if you know the exact figure, but I've heard something along the lines of, if someone wants to, we use the word unalive themselves so we don't get flagged by YouTube, but if someone wants to do that to themselves, it is a fairly short window. Most people who have tried it or thought about it come back and tell people like yourselves or therapists, you know, I felt like that for X amount of hours and then it passed and I was okay. Have you found a certain time frame where that actual willingness to do it passes, or even the ideation passes? So do you have any advice to someone who's in that situation to obviously go get help, wait 10 or 12 hours, and maybe it'll go away?
Call somebody and talk with them. Yeah. And I've had people tell me that I got in my car and I drove away because I didn't want to kill myself in the home where my family comes back to. And when they got there, they couldn't do it. Conversely, I think that's why you see some of these people that kill themselves in the home with the people they say they love, for them to come in, is that it was in them at that moment, and they did it.
If you're joining us right now, you're talking to or hearing from a real live hostage negotiator, the guy you see in the Denzel Washington movies. This is the real guy, Jim Fuda. So Jim, let's go back to the original story. And again, I cannot overstate my respect for first responders, because Jim witnessed, the story is telling us, the execution of a 17-year-old girl. You cannot unsee that once you see that, and you see that Jim is, by all outward appearances, a very decent, kind, and well-adjusted human being. But he, along with so many other people I interview, see things that thankfully we will never see. So Jim, my question to you when we kind of diverted off was, did you take it personally when this young girl was murdered before your eyes? Did you feel like you failed as a hostage negotiator, even though you basically had nothing to work with?
You feel some of that. And when you go to the critical and distress debriefings, I didn't kill her. That asshole did. And so you can only do what you can do. You can only be responsible for your part in trying to save a person. We followed all the protocols. We gave him some things to get something back. Things were going along well. I got one gun out for whatever reason. But the fact of the matter is that according to the shrinks who've heard about this case, said that this was a homicide waiting to happen. It was going to happen.
So you do ultimately go and you're able to interview him, I think, prior to him pleading guilty. Is that right?
No, it was after he pled guilty, before he went to the penitentiary.
Did he go, was there a trial, or he just pleaded and went to prison?
He pled guilty. Like 5 days later, it was at Walla Walla here in Walla Walla Penitentiary in our state.
And do we know if he's still serving time? I hope.
I think so. I do know that about 10 years later, an FBI agent, God rest his soul, Tom Strentz, who was a FBI profiler and a negotiator, he and I were friends. He came from Southern California and went interviewed with him, and he played the tape that we edited and put together for him, and he went off. He hates me. He said I tricked him. He's not that kind of person. Well, bullshit. He's that person. So
this FBI agent went and interviewed him again, and the guy was basically throwing you under the bus.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that interview. So you said it was a most difficult, basically 2-hour interview of your life. I mean, how did you prepare for that interview, and what did you really want to get from that interview? What was your goal in that interview?
I knew he was a sociopath. and very, very difficult, excuse me, to deal with. And I was hoping to tell the real facts and then his answers to them. And it happened. I wanted to show you that I was willing to play ball with you. That's why I threw the gun out. And he made it sound like, oh yeah, I just gave that out. And like you said, no, I told you, he held his hand out with the gun going, I've got this one, you assholes, and I'm not giving this one up. These kinds of things. And the fact that I asked about killing her. And I told you I would. Did you love Vanessa? Yes. I very much loved her, very much did. You loved her enough to frickin' kill her, that kind of thing. So all the classic signs were there.
And so, Jim, just more generally speaking, and I hope this guy is rotting in prison still, 33. I mean, that's 30 years ago that it happened. So he deserves to still be there. By the way, Jim, you look too young to have been a negotiator back in 93, let alone the late 80s when you said you were a negotiator. So good on you that you're looking young and healthy still.
Especially I'm 71. So
you're 71?
Yeah.
Wow, you look amazing. I hope I look as good as you. Wow, that's amazing. I kind of asked you this off the top. What are the most important attributes, which you answered, but when you get onto a hostage situation, onto the scene, what are the first things that you are saying to the hostage taker? How are you introducing yourself? What is the first thing you are asking for or asking of them? Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's you throw the titles out, you become I picked this up even before I was a negotiator, when I read Herb Cohen's "You Can Negotiate Anything," and it's a business negotiations thing, and a lot of it applies. It's just that the stakes are much higher, and I joke. I said, if you present yourself as a real flesh and blood human being, someone who has wants and needs like everybody else, there's a greater likelihood you'll get what you want. So you have to relay what they're going through with your own experiences. And that's hard for a lot of cops to do, whether you're lying when you're telling them that, or it is a real feeling, is you have to come across as legitimate. And when I put a team together, I try to look at who we have, what kind of person, what we've got going. And I pick the 4 people that come. Okay, you're going to be primary. And in a real hostage situation, the secondary needs to be experienced and remain calm. Because what happens is when they're passing notes to the primary, if the primary decides to use it, fine. If he doesn't, that's okay too. But you get an inexperienced guy that gets all wound up in the conversation, and now he starts underlining and patting, hitting the primary. What's he done? All he's done is frustrating the primary, and in essence is becoming the silent primary himself. So that person has to be able to stay detached, emotions detached, and let the primary negotiator say what he says in his own words. I can't put my words how I would say something in your mouth and make it sound legitimate. Mm-hmm. You got to say it the way you say it. And I think that's key, and to figure out, try to put that team together for that individual scenario you're headed out to.
That's another really interesting analogy about, you mentioned listening being the most important thing. And I said that is the most important thing for a TV broadcaster, an interviewer, but authenticity is arguably even more important. That's what you're saying. You got to be who you are. There's so many reporters on TV that I'm reporting for blah, 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 who try to be TV reporters, and they're the ones that are the most inauthentic. So I think that just personally, it's interesting to me, the parallels here. I think that by the way, when you go to buy a new car, do you always get the best deal?
Yeah, one my closest friends owns a Chevy dealership and a Toyota dealership, so I don't argue anymore. But I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You can relate it to real life. Some of the things. What was the name of the book you mentioned just a moment ago?
Herb Cohen's "You Can Negotiate Anything."
I'm gonna have to buy that. I need
Yeah.
that for my mother. I need to be able to argue with her. So I think there was one more story you had for us. I don't even remember what it was because we were talking about it at the beginning, but you care to share one more story?
Sure. Small town homicide suspect that was a nice man. He claimed he'd been a Vietnam War hero. Turned out he spent 4 months there, got sick, and got sent home. This particular day, what he did is his wife had divorced him. She had a current boyfriend, and he had got a precipitating factor within 24 hours. He had gotten court papers having to pay some extra child support, and he claimed that that he had gotten a vasectomy in Vietnam. And I said, I know those medics do a lot of freaking surgeries in the field, but I'll bet a elective vasectomy is not one of them. So he kills them, drives around this small community with the idea that he's going to his macho truck, had a PA system, all this kind of stuff on it, and he was going to force a confrontation with the police. They said, I can kill at least two of them before they kill me. They had him barricaded on a bridge. And I get called from the county to this small agency that wasn't affiliated with my agency. And I walk up and I see this scene, and everyone's telling me from where I parked my car to where I walked up to where they had him barricaded. And the chief of police is negotiating. Now, you don't put the commander in charge who can say yes or no to talk to the bad guy. There's got to be a filter. And so every guy spoke, well, we're going to be killing this one. And I'm going, why the hell did you call me? I don't want to come and witness this or be a part of somebody else being killed when it's your problem. So I talked to this guy, tell the chief there, please let me take over this. And so we get to talk, and he goes, so the first words out of this guy's mouth, he tells me, so I said, well, his name was Thomas. I said, Thomas, I'm the negotiator from the county. And so I'm here to talk to you. Tell me what's going on. And he says, oh, so you're the negotiator? Well, Mr. Negotiator. And he starts his truck, puts it in gear, and says, before I kill you, what are you going to tell me? And I went, and you sit there in that situation. It's so surreal where you sit back and you go, shit, you better make this good, kind of giggle yourself even. And so we talked for a while. I said, could you please turn the engine off? I can't hear you with the engine running. And he does. And then he goes on and on.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, but you've got to take the threat really seriously, right? I mean, you have to in your training. So if this guy says he's going to kill you, do you take a new posture? Do you get behind something? Like, how do you react to that?
I was behind at a car door open and was at an angle, and I had the engine block between me. So I was actually we were just shouting back and forth. We were that close, and sometimes a PA. So as we're talking, I said, I said, after about, an hour and a half into it, I said, you know what your problem is, Mr. Baja? And he starts his car again, puts it in the gear, and he said, before I kill you, what? And I said, you have PTSD. And he starts to cry. And I said, it's not you didn't do this. It's you were our hero for our country, which was bullshit. It wasn't. But I said, you were the hero for our country, and you were not provided the services that you needed for your mental health.
Wow.
And it took a while, another hour. I promised him a VA counselor, that kind of thing. Didn't promise him what year he was going to get it. But he stood out of his car, and of course, us poor stupid cops don't know how to do it. He had stood out there, unloaded all his guns, and then surrendered.
Wow. So that was really amazing thinking on your part to kind of play to his, his ego, but also his weakness, right? Because you're basically telling him he's a hero and he was mistreated, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. And so that ended. Did he face criminal charges for, threatening a police officer, anything along those lines? What happened?
Those misdemeanor things, they go out of the way. Forget that. He had a double homicide to worry about. And,
okay.
Yeah, and to tell you about this guy is he. You'll see when you see the slide deck, there's a picture of a towel with blood on it, and it was all nicely neat put back. After he murdered them, he had blood on his hands, so he went into their bathroom, cleaned himself up, and then washed his hands. Man, he's a nice man. He a real issue. And then later on, I don't think it was in court, but the 7-year-old daughter was hiding in the house behind a planter box when this happened. And he said, had he known the daughter had been watching, he would have killed her too, because he didn't want the girl knowing up that daddy killed mom.
Jeez. I mean, what I think about hearing these stories, because the first two at least were from 1993, people just react in a window of time, to emotionally, whether it's a divorce or custody battle. But if people were just able to let some time pass and not react so violently, it's kind of the old cliche, like time heals all wounds. And it's just bizarre because a lot of these cases you're talking about are 30 plus years ago. And I'm sure if you went and spoke to that, the first guy on the deadline, killed on a deadline story, I'm sure he's now matured to some degree and probably have a totally different perspective on everything that happened 30 something years ago. So it's interesting to me.
I think that especially in these DV cases where somebody kills the other partner, if they could take that 15 seconds of their life back, they would in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what's it like after 33 years of doing this to retire? I mean, it's got to be, again, I will make the news analogy. It was very difficult for me to leave the news business because it's such an adrenaline filled job where you're swooping into places where there's big events going on, and then all of a sudden that disappears. Was it tough for you to extricate yourself from hostage negotiations?
Yeah, but here's what I did though: is that I really haven't retired. Yeah. I retired St. Patrick's Day 2006 after 33 years. Wow. 5 days later, I was on a plane to Pakistan, where I taught hostage negotiations and other leadership courses. So I kind of stayed in the mix, but in a different environment. While I was still working for the sheriff's office after our WTO here, remember that went to shit here in what was that, 2000 or 99? And I wrote the demonstration management course for Indonesia and was allowed to go back and teach a few iterations of that in 2001, 2002. So I had my name in with the feds in one of their programs. So then I just kept my cards open and went to Indonesia, came back, went to Pakistan, and I did 2 years, spent 8 months out of a 2-year period in and out of Pakistan, then went to work for Microsoft as a global event security director, hated that job. And then went back to the feds. And then I went to, I lived in Banja Luka, Bosnia, the Serb part of Bosnia. So This international program that we're doing now, what we started using in November of 2017, we started using a tip app, an anonymous tip app, and our tips quadrupled overnight and our arrests more than doubled. And I joke, I can't get my granddaughter to talk to me on the telephone, but she texts me back in 30 seconds. So it's a new form of communication. They trust it. And I thought, how can we utilize this overseas with transnational crimes, all corruption based? And I randomly picked 7: human trafficking, terrorism, illicit trade, arms dealing, drug smuggling, cybercrime, and bank fraud. Went back to Banja Luka with trusted cops, had them bring 4 countries together, did 1 press release, and had 47 tips in a week. So we realized 2 things: a local program couldn't sustain it, and 2, Bosnia was not the place to start. Bosniak Muslims, Croats, Catholics, Serbs, Orthodox. So we moved it to Serbia. And so I'm in Serbia quite a bit now, in Belgrade. And
wow. My mother, who I host a show with, is Serbian, from a little town called Subotica, which we just visited. I just wrote a book about my mother, and it was I was expecting it to be totally different than what I witnessed. I didn't go to Belgrade. I was in Budapest. But is that something that you can bring stateside? Is that something that would work here?
It already is working here. It's called P3 Tips. It's a free download. It's all around the country, and it works great. And we filter those tips to in most cases down to the investigating detective. So I thought, what better way to utilize this and hit these crimes at the source or the transit routes before it comes to the Western world? Moldova got a hold of us because of the influx of the refugees, the Ukrainian refugees, which brings a whole new level of corruption. And so we're ready to open 2 programs, one in Belgrade and one in Chisinau. So I'll be going back in probably another 6 weeks to 2 months and get those programs open, which now we're dealing, of course, with our feds now, with hopefully getting some funding there, but now it's been privately funded up until this point. So we're looking at some other avenues of funding to get it going on a bigger scale.
Super fascinating conversation. The final question is personally the most important. I think I saw a wedding band on your left hand, if I'm looking correctly. How does one negotiate with their wife? Give me some tips here, Jim. Do I just have to say yes to everything? That's the old adage.
Here's the issue: is the closer you are personally to the situation, the harder it is to use your negotiation tactics. I was single for 20 years, and I met my Swiss wife. She was one of the execs for Zurich Financial Services on a temporary assignment in Seattle. We met in the business class lounge of British Air here in Seattle. And I joked with her. I said, okay, our first date was in the lounge. Our second date was 10 hours on the plane. Our third date, I stood at your gate while you were waiting to go to Zurich, and I had 10 hours in the London airport before I went to Islamabad. So I said I was going to be gone for 30 days. I said, you know what happens now? The 4th date, sex is obligatory. So she gets my sense of humor, and it's been a great stage of life. We've been together 17 years, and it's been great.
Congrats. Yeah. As they say in the Jewish religion, mazel tov. That's awesome. Yeah. Excellent. What a fascinating conversation. Huge thanks goes out to Jim Fuda, who is so much more than just his bio, but 33 years with the King County Sheriff's Office. That, of course, is the greater Seattle area. He is a physical security specialist and a hostage negotiator. He did some duty with Presidents George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Nelson Mandela, Maya Angelou, and you just heard he's doing a lot of international work for the U.S. Department of Justice in Bosnia, Indonesia, Pakistan, and the director of Crime Stoppers of Puget Sound. Jim, we've got the best guests in all of true crime. Are you willing to come back in that capacity when we have a story, either an investigative type story or a story that involves a hostage situation? Will you come back and give us your professional take on it all?
Absolutely. In fact, the cool thing about this being on Zoom is that even if I'm overseas, I can do it.
Yeah, 100%. We will get you there. Obviously, another best guest just added to the roster. You were just watching a special episode of Surviving My Biggest Case. In this case, several cases, Jim Fuda, another first responder who deserves all the credit in the world. Appreciate you being here. Love you, America. Love you, Serbia.